Today it's really hot, so let's airbrush a figure skating dress.
Hello and welcome back to my channel. Today's video is a little bit different. Backed by popular demand, it's another figure skating dress related video. I will leave some of my previous figure skating dress related videos up here on screen, but for today's video, I thought it would be really fun to bring you along on the process of airbrushing a figure skating dress. This isn't necessarily a tutorial, but this is a good introduction if you have been curious about what airbrushing a figure skating dress looks like or what the process is. So with all that being said, let's get right into the video.
This is the figure skating dress. I don't even know if I'm in frame. We're just gonna wing it. This is the skating dress. Now, normally I would airbrush everything before I put it together, but I felt like doing the opposite today for some reason. So we're gonna airbrush the nude to basically make this transition a little less aggressive. She's gonna put appliques over it, so I'm not too worried about like needing something underneath. That can be added later too. At first I wasn't gonna add any airbrushing to like this red hot pink. I think I'm going to maybe on the skirt, and I kind of want to add maybe a little extra underneath because I don't know. These are all things that I will do towards the end, but today the main goal is to do this part. The first step is to remove the dress from the mannequin so I can cover the mannequin in saran wrap. Oh, well, I put that in there and then it fell right back. The first step to making sure that you don't spray paint the entire mannequin is to cover it in saran wrap, so we're going to do that right now. Now that that is done, it's time to put the dress back on said mannequin with the saran wrap on it. Guys, it's like 100 degrees. I'm kind of dying.
When you're putting the dress back, you just want to make sure that none of the wrap comes up with it. Sometimes when you're putting the bottoms up over the hips, it can be a bit of a tight squeeze and the saran wrap is a bit sticky. Next, I'm going to add a thick cardstock to the open mesh area, mostly because this dress is a little bit bigger than the mannequin I'm putting it on, so I want to make sure that I stretch all of the fabric out because when you are airbrushing, any draping or wrinkled fabric will show. If you want that really smooth transition look, you want to make sure that you also pin the fabric to make sure that everything is completely stretched out to be as flat as possible. Now, I want to go into all of the items that I will be using today to airbrush the figure skating dress. The first item that you're obviously going to need for a project like this is an airbrush, and I am using the Iwata Neo. This is one of their more affordable beginner options, and I think it's 100% worth the price. If you're debating between getting a cheap $20 to $40 one on Amazon and the Iwata Neo, please go with the Neo. You will have to be a little bit more mindful of the setup and takedown process to take care of an airbrush like this compared to one of the Amazon ones, but I think it's completely worth it. I decided to go with this model instead of their other versions because I was looking for something that would be easy for transitional pieces. I don't really use the airbrush as a large coverage. I use it as a transitional piece from when I dip dye fabrics or hand paint them. Down the road, I will definitely be purchasing some of their other models, but for right now, this is all I need. And that leads me into the second item you're going to need, which is an air compressor. I am using the Iwata Neo air compressor, and this is actually another reason why I went with the Neo airbrush is because it was sold as a beginner set for basically the same price as the airbrush, I'm pretty sure at Blick. Since I do all of the airbrushing at my own house, I don't really have space in my garage for a large air compressor, so I wanted a portable one that also had decent settings for the air pressure because that's actually a really key factor when it comes to airbrushing dresses. This air compressor is easy to use and it has 3 settings, high, medium, and low, and they all work really well with different mixtures of paint, which leads me into the next important item, and that is the paint that you'll be using for your airbrush project. For today's project, I am using the Jacquard black fabric paint. I think this is better if you were doing hand painting, but you can also cut this with water and reducer in order to make it an airbrush paint because it is a little bit thick by itself. Otherwise, my go-to paint for airbrushing is Createx. For the most part, a lot of their colors are fairly non-toxic when it comes to airbrushing compared to some other brands. Golden acrylics also work really well for airbrushing fabric. However, because some of those colors use certain pigments, you do want to make sure that you're working in a properly ventilated area for the golden acrylics, which is why I tend to stick with Createx. In addition to the proper paint for your project, you also want to make sure you have a liquid that can thin out the paint to make sure it can flow through the airbrush without getting clogged. So I'm going to be using distilled water and the Createx reducer. In addition to distilled water and reducer, you also want to make sure you have airbrush cleaner because this is going to make cleaning up your project once you're finished a lot easier. Along with that, another optional item you can get for your project is an airbrush cleaning pot. I highly recommend this if you're going to be switching between different colors. I think I got this for $10 on Amazon or something, and it has literally saved me so much time between changing colors and just making sure that I clean out my airbrush completely. So now that we have gone over everything you are going to need for your airbrush project, it is now time time to go over the mixture of paint that you'll be creating to put into the airbrush. This part is a little bit tricky, so I can make a future video about it, but I'm just going to give a general overview for today. When it comes to mixing your paint, at least for me, honestly, there isn't a specific like numbered ratio that you want to stick with for paint to water or paint to water to reducer. For the most part, you want to make sure your final paint mixture is the consistency of skim milk, avoiding any clumps to make sure that the paint can pass through the airbrush seamlessly. After you've mixed your paint to the correct consistency, it's now time to start airbrushing. And one thing I like to do before I start airbrushing on my project is to actually test the PSI settings on a scrap piece of paper or scrap piece of fabric to find the setting that's going to work best for the paint mixture that I have created for the project. Once I've figured out what settings I'm going to use for the project, it is now time to start airbrushing, and sometimes this can be a little bit daunting. My best advice for this is to create a sketch of the dress or whatever you're working on and have it next to you so that you can see what areas are going to look like what. Much like painting or any other artistic medium, there are going to be some specific techniques that work better for certain situations compared to others, but for the most part, I just like to go in with an open mind and do whatever my heart desires, which I know for people who are more type A compared to type B, or someone who needs a very specific visualization, that might be a little bit hard to deal with, so do whatever method works best for you. I just tend to go in and hope for the best. I will say a preferred method that I did not use for this video, but I often use for my other projects, is I will actually hand dye the fabric to have a softer ombre base to the fabric pieces, because depending on how long you leave it in the water and different temperatures, you can actually make a nice transition and then go back over it with different colors if the RIT dye you have is not the correct color or if it's a little bit patchy. I do have a fine art degree, which is where some of my knowledge for these kinds of things come from. I can make more videos in the future going over a bit more of the detailed process that goes into the ombre dip dye or even creating different fabric paints, because there is actually a way to turn household acrylics into fabric paint for figure skating dresses, especially if you'd like to do it with airbrushing. But anyways, once you are done airbrushing, I would recommend letting the paint dry, and then once that is completely dry, I would go back over it either with an iron or a Cricut heat press just to make sure that you are heat setting the fabric paint. Sometimes heat does make the colors lighter, so if you need to, you can do a couple different coats of airbrushing to get the color that you desire. I will say that heat pressing your paint once you are done with your project is a great way to set the paint and limit your chances from anything running if it does get wet. However, this does not necessarily mean that your fabric paint is going to be 100% waterproof, so I would never throw your completed project directly into the washing machine or fully submerge it underwater. After you've done all of that, your project is all ready to go. You can start adding appliques, rhinestones, whatever you would like to do to finish your garment. I will leave some clips of the current progress of what the dress looks like now after the skater has added their own rhinestones and appliques. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed the video. I know a lot of you have been asking for more figure skating dress or costume making related content, so I'll try to put a few in here and there. Anyways, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.